With Malaysia's ruling party embroiled in a massive corruption scandal and elections not far off, will the people vote for change? I'll ask the leader of the Malaysian opposition, Wan Azizah Wan Ismail. I'm Mehdi Hassan, also on the show. With Iranians heading for the polls next Friday, what does the future hold for President Hassan Rouhani, and how much of his reform agenda was he even able to get through? That's our debate in the arena. But first, with her husband, the former Deputy Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, still in prison on what many say are trumped-up charges, it will be Wan Azizah Wan Ismail who leads the opposition into the next Malaysian elections. And in an attempt to unseat Prime Minister Najib Razak, who's in the midst of a corruption scandal, she's joined up with former PM Mahathir Mohamad. So, could she be Malaysia's first female Prime Minister? This week's headliner, the President of Malaysia's People's Justice Party, Wan Azizah Wan Ismail. Wan Azizah, thanks for joining me on UpFront. As president of Malaysia's People's Justice Party, the PKR, and leader of the opposition, you're now in coalition with a party led by former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. That's the same Mahathir who less than 20 years ago backed the imprisoning of your husband, the then Deputy Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, in what many described as a politically motivated prosecution. Some people might be asking, how desperate for power are you that you've effectively done a deal with the devil? You've done a deal with the man accused of locking up your own husband.
Of course not. If you look at that way, that Mahathir has come to us, to opposition, that means how bad is Najib Razak, the man that Mahathir himself chose, handpicked to become
Prime Minister,
the Prime Minister. So that's how it shows that we need change. And the change of government in Malaysia is much desired by the people. So it's not alliance with the devil, no. And if the man himself, Anwar Ibrahim, could forgive, and as the saying goes, to err is human, to forgive divine.
To forgive is one thing, but your husband, Anwar Ibrahim, is the one who said in 2015 that a Mahathir-led removal of Najib without real reform will only satisfy some cronies. It will do nothing to bring about real change for the people. You and your husband are now basically empowering those same cronies he mentioned by working with Mahathir today.
I don't agree. We didn't ask him to join. He joined us out of his own free will.
So you believe he's changed his approach to politics, to democracy, to human rights?
Well, some of the ways, I'm sure he has his old ways. But the fact that he wants to change the present government, seeped in kleptocracy, kleptocrat government, I'm saying the Malay word for it, and how much that we have to change the government because of the dire conditions.
But you're still, just to be clear, you're willing to work with him without a formal apology on his part for the role he played in your husband's downfall?
We have to go beyond that. If I'm going to wait for an apology and make it such a big deal out of it, he has come. He has actually almost admitted, and now he is with us.
In the midst of pretty big economic problems for Malaysia and an ongoing corruption scandal in which the current Prime Minister Najib Razak is alleged to have received in his account more than $1 billion, mainly from the State Development Fund 1MDB, your party filed a no-confidence vote against him, but failed to oust him. Your critics say your party was too weak, too divided, and in a sense, the opposition is to blame for the fact that he's still in office today.
No, because the way Malaysia has been ruled, whatever you do, whatever you want to do, the government holds the strings. So it's kind of, your hands are tied and you want to make a move, it's difficult. That doesn't mean that the people are not supporting us. We had the popular votes, but to materialize it and to make it happen, that will be our most pressing.
But that's the point. You have the popular votes, you say. Public opinion was very critical of the Prime Minister over this corruption scandal, and yet your critics would say, through sheer incompetence, you and your fellow coalition parties, the DAP and others, could not bring about a no-confidence vote in Parliament that was successful. What does that say about the opposition?
We are a bit, it's seen to be fragmented, but we have had changes made. So we cannot give up. This is our country, this is our future. So we have to continue and do something. And I call for all Malaysians to do something about it.
Okay, so on the something, I mean, given the corruption allegations against the Prime Minister, it's easy for you as the opposition to give anti-Najib speeches, organise anti-Najib rallies. But what are you offering the voters aside from that? What alternative, credible, coherent vision are you offering Malaysia that the Prime Minister isn't?
If you look at some of the states that we control, Selangor is a case in point. It's a showcase of how a chief minister from the opposition, from my party, has ruled the state. And this is the richest state in Malaysia. And how it has come with a surplus budget, and now we've had free water, and then we also have healthcare benefits. Also in Penang, where I come from and where my constituency come from. I have a state constituency in Selangor. I have a parliamentary constituency in Penang. How the chief minister has done Penang good, and how it's cleaner, better, healthier Penang. So these are the things that we can showcase and say that, look, yes, we are not having any experience, but no experience in corruption, cronyism, and the wrong things that has happened to our country.
And yet, despite those successes that you point to at a local and state level, shouldn't you be leading in the polls? Shouldn't you be heading for an easy victory?
Malaysians are divided in the sense that you don't have free press. So they do not know, they can't make an informed decision of what we can offer. So that is one of the problems that we face. It's not a level playing field. The gerrymandering has gone so far that now, of course, we have actually stopped it. We managed to stop the delineation process. We went to the courts. We faced a lot of problems. But that doesn't mean that we have to give up.
Your former coalition of opposition parties was partly torn apart because the so-called Islamist party, the Pan-Malaysian Islamic Party, the PAS, had been pushing a controversial bill to enhance the power of Sharia courts in Kelantan state, which would mean harsher hudud punishments, things like lashings, stonings, amputations. Why on earth would you be willing to be in a coalition with a party proposing such a horrific and extreme law?
They have actually left us.
But you were in coalition with them at the time when they proposed it.
We were in coalition, and that time they said the hudud was not the priority. They agreed on the federal constitution of our country. Islam is the state religion, with, of course, freedom of religion for others. And we already agreed on that. We talk about maqasid Sharia. What is the priority that we need? You know, poverty eradication, education.
Some say that you can't win again without them as part of your coalition. Would you be willing to accept them back into your coalition while they're supporting this bill?
It doesn't go that way, because they are split, and the progressive ones, and especially the leaders from them, have now formed a new party, and they are with us.
Okay, but PAS and this bill, you want nothing to do with them?
We want the votes for the people on the ground.
You're trying to become the leader of Malaysia. Is it a red line for you?
Yes.
This hudud bill? Is it something you will never tolerate, accept?
Hudud, as a Muslim, of course, you know, you just have to accept these are God's laws. But the implementation is different. Then you talk about how you're going to do it, priority, and I think I'm not in a position as an ulama to talk about it.
But you might be in a position as Prime Minister to legislate criminal justice laws and policies. Are you saying on your watch as Prime Minister of Malaysia there will be no quote-unquote hudud laws, no stonings, no amputations, none of that? Can you give that declaration here and now?
The declaration that hudud is not implemented unless all the things that are supposed to be in line of justice are there.
I get that's important, but just to clear, so you're saying there's a situation where stoning might be acceptable in Malaysia?
Not in the near future.
Wan Azizah, you've been hailed as one of the most iconic female political figures in Southeast Asia. You're known for championing women's rights, political participation. You're a role model to many as leader of a political party. But will you actually become Malaysia's first female prime minister if the opposition wins the next election? Because some coalition allies of yours say, no, she'll just be an interim prime minister. Others have suggested Mahathir's son will be the opposition's candidate for prime minister. So can you confirm, A, whether you will definitely be the Prime Minister, and B, do you think you're facing misogyny in Malaysia?
Well, the Prime Minister of Malaysia will be the one who enjoys the support of the majority of the members of Parliament. So whoever gets that will become Prime Minister. If I get that, of course, I don't mind being the interim Prime Minister. It's a well-known fact.
Interim in terms of you would again give up your seat if your husband were to be released from prison and pardoned and be allowed to take part in politics again?
Yes, it's part of the plan. Because I am frank about it. It's not the position that I'm after, but I'm after a change of government. The BN government is one that we need to change.
But wouldn't a lot of women, Malaysian women, young women watching this say, that's pretty disappointing. Look, she's running this party while her husband's in prison. If they win, it'll be because of her leadership. She should be the Prime Minister. Why should she give up her seat to her husband if he gets released? Why are you a seat warmer? Why are you just a proxy for your husband? Why aren't you your own person?
Because I think, frankly, he's a better position. He's a better leader. He's a better administrator. He's a better guy for the job. Why not?
But he's not running for the job. He's in prison. He currently can't return to politics under his sentencing. Therefore, aren't you undermining your own message? Won't a lot of Malaysians say, well, what's the point of voting for her? She's not even the real leader. She's not even going to be a real prime minister.
No, because the thing is that if you take polls, and one of the polls show that Anwar is the man that is supposed to be the next prime minister, and the polls show that he is the most popular. So if there is no way...
That's fine. So you're accepting then that you're a seat warmer for your husband? You're keeping the seat warm for him to come back?
I don't mind, yeah.
Just on your husband, Anwar Ibrahim, when in 2015 the federal court upheld a controversial 5-year jail sentence imposed on him for an absurd and outrageous sodomy conviction, human rights groups condemned that decision as a major setback for human rights in Malaysia. What does his continued incarceration say about the state of Malaysian justice, the state of Malaysian democracy today, in your view?
It's not independent, the judiciary. The judges are appointed by the Prime Minister. And even the Attorney General is appointed by the Prime Minister. And now, of course, whatever Anwar has gone through, the judges that gave him that sentence then are now promoted to be the Chief Judge of Malaysia. Well, we hope that, whatever is that faces us and the obstacles that are in place, we still continue, because whatever is that we do is for our future. Whether or not it gets or not, inshallah, it's part of the thing that we have to continue.
Wan Azizah, thank you for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you.
There's a presidential election in Iran next week. President Hassan Rouhani is on course for victory against not one but two ultra-conservative challengers, and it might be close. Internationally, Rouhani has received praise for agreeing to the nuclear deal and received criticism for his government's support of Bashar al-Assad. But at home, many Iranians are more concerned about the dire state of the economy and the lack of freedom. Has Rouhani really been the reformer he said he'd be? Joining me to debate this in the arena are Mohammad Marandi, a prominent Iranian political analyst and academic at the University of Tehran, and Maziar Bahari, an Iranian-Canadian journalist and human rights activist who in 2009 was imprisoned by the Iranian government over false claims of espionage. Thank you both for joining me on UpFront. Maziar Bahari, it's been almost 4 years since Hassan Rouhani was elected president of Iran. A lot of people were hopeful about Iran's reformist agenda under Rouhani, especially since he came after 8 years of Ahmadinejad. Do you think Rouhani lived up to expectations? Has he succeeded in reforming Iran, opening it up to social, economic progress?
Well, I think maybe people had wrong expectations from Rouhani, because you have to understand that Iran is like an absolute monarchy. And the president of Iran is like a prime minister in an absolute monarchy. The absolute monarch, of course, is the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. So the president of Iran does not really have actual power in order to open up the country or do the reforms that he wishes to do. But I think that President Rouhani has an acceptable track record in terms of certain things that he wanted to do. Of course, there have been human rights abuses, there have been suppression of the press, and there have been suppression of some of the supporters of President Rouhani by the judiciary, by the Revolutionary Guards, by the different institutions that are under control of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei.
Mohammed Marandi, he has an acceptable track record, says Mazia Bahari, but he isn't as far ahead in the polls as some assumed he might be at this stage, given his record.
Well, I think this is basically a caricature of reality. Elections in Iran are very important. The president has a great deal of power. The turnout for Iranian presidential elections is always high, and that shows that it's meaningful for people. If it really wasn't meaningful, then we would be implying that people are just foolish and voting for something that's not important. The leader himself is answerable to a council that is itself elected by the people, and we have parliament, we have local elections. So I think that the dominant narrative in the West is something that we really should not take too seriously. Dr. Rouhani, or President Rouhani, he is having a difficult situation, contrary to the previous presidents who usually won their re-elections with landslides.
Is the main reason for his difficulty, Mohammed Marandi, the state of the economy? Because on the one hand, inflation has dropped from 40% when he came to power to 12% now. Economic growth is up. On the other hand, unemployment's still at 13%. Youth unemployment's at nearly 30%. Have ordinary Iranians felt the benefits from President Rouhani's nuclear deal, for example, and the lifting of sanctions? Doesn't look like they have.
Yes, I think that's by far the major issue. According to polls, the overwhelming majority of Iranians are concerned about unemployment, and after that, it's wages. The economy has not benefited from the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement. It is important, though, to note that all the candidates, including the most important ones, they've voiced their support for the JCPOA. They've said that Iran will continue to pursue and implement the JCPOA.
Mazia, isn't the problem for someone like yourself and the critique you advanced that it's all very well to say there's human rights problems in Iran, and clearly there are human rights abuses in Iran, but for average Iranians going to the polls next Friday, human rights might not be top of their list, and that's what the president of Iran is responsible for in their eyes, getting the economy right.
Well, of course, many people think that the economy is the main reason to go to the polls, and that's why they think that they have to elect maybe another candidate, because they think that President Rouhani has failed to improve the economy. But also we have to understand that President Rouhani, again, as a prime minister in an absolute monarchy, is not in charge of the Iranian economy. Many economic institutions in Iran, many industrial institutions in Iran are under the supervision, direct supervision of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The foundations, the industries that are held by the Revolutionary Guard, and they're not really accountable. And I agree with Dr. Marandi that the elections are important in Iran, and I think people go to Iran to vote in order to express themselves, to use the very little space that they have every 4 years to express their opinions. And sometimes these expressions of opinions are suppressed.
Mohammed Marandi, let me put that point that Mazia Bahari made about Ayatollah Khamenei being the absolute monarch, which you pushed back against earlier. But isn't it the case, as Mazia Bahari points out, that he does control a vast array of important institutions, from the armed forces to the security services to the intelligence agencies to the appointments to the judiciary? I mean, his title kind of gives it away, supreme leader, and he's unelected.
Well, supreme leader is an English term. That's not what it is in Persian. Actually, that is another construct of the West.
Does he not have those powers over the judiciary, the armed forces, the security services, the intelligence agencies?
No, actually, the Minister of Intelligence is chosen by the president and approved by parliament. But he is himself elected by a body. That body can remove him the leader whenever they like. That is their responsibility, and they have that right.
In theory,
on the other hand,
in theory.
the previous president, Mr. Ahmadinejad, when he was the president of the country, he was the person who everyone in the West was saying is a threat to the world. If he had no authority, then why was there so much fear-mongering? President Rouhani or any other president doesn't have authority, but President Ahmadinejad did have authority. He was going to destroy the world.
Let me just ask Mohammed Marandi, just to be clear, for our viewers watching across the world, no one is saying, I don't think, that the president of Iran has no power, but surely you're not suggesting he has as much power as the quote-unquote supreme leader. Surely you're not saying he has room to maneuver on his own or go against the supreme leader if he wanted to. Surely you're not suggesting that.
He is the #1 authority in the country, and the president is the #2 authority in the country. And the very fact that in the previous election, the turnout for the president was 73%, and in the election before that, it was 83%, shows how important elections are in Iran.
Maziar, what's your response to that?
The response to that is that people are trying to use any space that they can in order to express themselves. The presidential election is very important in Iran. The president is very important authority, as Dr. Marandi said. He is the #2 authority in Iran, but the difference between #1 and #2 is huge. And the powers of the president are limited hugely by an unaccountable leader who is the supreme leader of Iran.
Well, let me put that.
The main reason that people are going back to the polls is that they look around in the region. They look at the situation in Iraq. They look at the situation in Syria. People are not interested in revolutions. People want reforms, and people are giving a chance to the government of Iran, to the supreme leader of Iran, every 4 years to reform itself.
Maziar Bahari says there's a huge gap between 1 and 2. If I'm an Iranian voter, why can I only vote for #2? Why can't I vote for #1 if I'm supposed to be living in a democracy?
Well, in Iran, they choose a council of experts that itself chooses the leader. And the system is devised in a way so that the leader is someone who is not going out and promoting himself here and there for election.
Maziar Bahari, you were famously, infamously held by the Iranian authorities in 2009 for 118 days. You gave a coerced confession on TV. Do you believe the situation for journalists, for human rights activists, for civil society groups is significantly better today in Iran under Rouhani than it was in 2009 under Ahmadinejad?
No, I think the situation is worse because the Revolutionary Guards Intelligence Unit and the Iranian judiciary, they have found different ways to intimidate journalists, to suppress freedom of expression, and to imprison journalists and force them into exile in many cases. So again, I don't blame it on President Rouhani because he has very limited power. I think the blame is squarely on Ayatollah Khamenei's shoulders. And also, Dr. Marandi, since you're talking about the regime being so innocent.
He says that people are satisfied with President Rouhani, but on the other hand, he's saying that the situation in Iran today is worse than it was before. This is, again, this doesn't make sense. Anything that makes Iran look bad or that fits within that narrative is logical, even though there are inconsistencies within the narrative.
Maziar, before we finish, there are hardliners in Iran, we're told, who want to tear up the nuclear deal, just as there are hardliners in Washington, D.C. in the Trump administration who would love to tear up that deal. Are you worried about the future of the nuclear deal?
Well, I don't think that there is any danger in terms of Iranians tearing up the nuclear deal because, as Dr. Marandi said, all the candidates, even the hardliners, they have said that they're going to respect the deal. I think there is more dangers of Americans trying to tear up the deal. I don't think there is a danger in Iran.
And will the re-election of President Rouhani, Mohammed Marandi, be a vindication of the nuclear deal that he risked a lot of political capital on to sign?
I don't know. I can't comment on that in particular. We'd have to see the polls. But I think that in general there is a consensus among the different politicians and different political factions in Iran about the nuclear agreement, that they will pursue it and they will implement it, and they will demand that the Americans, contrary to what they're doing now, that the Americans implement it. I think that at the end of the day, President Rouhani will be judged on the economy. He has his arguments, his opponents have their arguments. We'll have to see.
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining me in the arena. That's our show. Up Front will be back next week.